Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. On this episode, we're going to address the three questions highly compensated individuals will want to ask about protecting their earnings. Thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Our special guest today is Mark Singer. He is a partner with Newark, Delaware-based Newton One Advisors. Mark's specialty is advising highly compensated C-suite executives. And I couldn't think of a better guest for today's episode. Three questions highly compensated individuals will want to ask about protecting their earnings. Mark, I want to thank you for joining us. So welcome to the Three Questions podcast.
Wayne, thank you for having me. I had a chance to view, a handful of your recordings, and they're done very well. The structure, I love the three questions. It's very good information, and the way it's provided to your audience is fantastic. So I appreciate you thinking of me to be part of it. So thank you.
Well, you know what? Given the topic, and this has been one of my favorite topics over the years, and I remember back, believe it or not, this is back in 2003, Mark, if you can believe this. I had a goal for that year of asking every new prospective client I asked what their most valuable financial asset was.
I love it.
Every one of them, save for one, they all said, you can guess what they all told me. They said, oh, my house. And only one of those people, and I met more than two people, I can assure you. Just to be clear, we did have a fairly, I don't know, it was a lot of large numbers, but it was a fairly decent number of a good segment of people, and only one of them were correct, and because he was so close to retirement.
Yeah.
But most everybody I met with, their most valuable financial asset, we know, is their ability to make money.
Well, that, and I always hear, or at least from my perspective, and as I engage with executives, however you want to label them, it's, well, my health as well. My health, my house. So, okay, so if we can agree that it's your health, or you say your house.
We're heading in the right direction. Health over house. You kind of get there, but a lot of people, they always revert back to their property, or maybe if they've been really successful, they'll mention their stock or bond portfolio or their 401k. But I think we both can agree that their ability to earn money can be incredibly powerful and a big driver of their overall wealth.
If it's not
general,
one, it's
yeah, I would say, one thing I think both you and I can agree on is that wealth management as a sort of overview practice is very multifaceted. There are several areas beyond, investing, retirement planning that need to be discussed. And again, I think a good example of this is almost everyone who works, they do so to earn an income, and that income they earn, is what they use to provide the lifestyle and pays for their expenses. And if they were to face a serious financial risk, and they couldn't no longer, are able to work due to an injury or an illness, that becomes a significant problem. And the interesting fact of that is the majority of North Americans, people in Canada and the US, for example, they don't realize this risk until they experience a disability that interrupts their stream of income. And by the time you get to that point, it's too late to do anything about it. Yeah. And I'm sure you would agree that this risk even applies to highly compensated or C-suite executives as well. And in fact, I would make the point that they probably have, in terms of actual dollars, they have more to risk than most people.
I would agree. And not just because I'm in that line of work, but just seeing it over time. And if anything, at that point, you're ensuring a lifestyle, the way they've become accustomed to living based on the revenue that they've generated over the years, the success they've had within their particular industry. And fortunately, but unfortunately, some of the plans that are provided graciously through their work, which are great foundational programs, just sometimes don't meet the needs of those that are deemed executives or managerial staffing or part of the C-suite. And education is key when it comes to those programs.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And again, most people are so busy working in their business that they don't have time to focus on these things, and they basically take for granted that when they hear that, for example, oh, I've got a long-term disability benefit, and they automatically think, well, that's going to protect my paycheck. And sometimes they are sadly mistaken.
And that could be the furthest from the truth, and to no one's fault. I mean, you did hit the nail on the head. If you're overseeing a team or you're at that level from an executive standpoint, they're being pulled in so many directions. So to know the details of the benefits portfolio and what it covers and what it may not cover, it's not really their fault. And some are very astute in that world and understand it, but there's people such as yourself and myself and Newton One to help educate them on this is what's covered and this is what's at risk. And here are ways we can help mitigate that risk with other solutions, maybe through your employer or outside of your employer.
So today's topic, the 3 questions highly compensated individuals will want to ask about protecting their earnings. We're going to talk about what is for many, again, their most valuable financial asset, their paycheck. Mark, let's just get right to our questions right now and just what the rubber hit the road here. So, and again, these questions are being asked from the lens of the actual employee here, just to be clear. So question number 1, what is the maximum benefit my employer-sponsored plan will provide?
It's a great question. I think you came up with this one, so kudos to you. But group programs, and this is not me talking down on them by any means. Group employer-sponsored programs, so group long-term disability, if your business offers it, is great foundational coverage. It's cost-effective. The underwriting is usually guaranteed issue, so you don't have to go through underwriting as long as you're working at that business for a duration of time. But there are limitations in terms of coverage amounts, typically a percentage with a benefit maximum cap, 60% of your monthly earnings to $15,000. Now that comes into play for the discussion today, executives, those earning above $15,000 a month earnings, that 60% begins to dwindle. So when you get into that realm of executives or C-suite, you really don't focus so much on the percentage because they're most likely capping out on the monthly maximum, which could be 15, 20, 25, depending on how large the business is and how many executives are around, or if not above that maximum, which most you would find out if you're at that $20,000 to $25,000 a month maximum, there's going to be a good deal of those earning above that. So what does that look like? If you have a 60% to $10,000 a month maximum, and you have someone that covers 200 grand in earnings, if you have someone that's earning 500 grand, they're essentially underinsured from a 300 grand perspective. So how do we fill that gap? And there's some programs that have, and I can't stress this enough, if you have the option, if your employer graciously offers you an option to buy up on top of what may be employer sponsored that they're paying for, take advantage of it. Max that out as much as you can, because you're going to bypass all of the health underwriting and financial underwriting that you would have to go through if you go the true individual route at a much lower premium amount as well, because the risk is spread out amongst a group versus one individual. So max out on as much group as you can through your employer, because it's going to be more affordable and easily accessible. And then if there's still a shortfall, that's where you can really dive into other individual solutions that are going to be owned specifically by yourself.
I'm gonna jump in on this and bring up one point, and it's a tax related matter.
Yeah.
And that is this. Okay, so one of the great points you talked about the employer sponsored plans is the underwriting is much more easy to basically to apply and qualify for coverage. But there's a tax angle that can often had to be thought about here, and that is most employer sponsored plans are in fact paid for by the employer, and therefore this benefit, this 60% we'll talk about, the 60% that you earn becomes a taxable benefit. So using your simple math of 10% or 60% of a $10,000 a month salary, all of a sudden your taxable portion is in fact that $6,000, the 60% of 10,000, the $6,000 becomes the taxable benefit that you're going to earn. If the employer is paying, if you're paying for the insurance, then it's not taxable. But if the employer pays, it is taxable. So when you look at the bottom line, which is what is my net income, you're going to see a significantly lower amount of earned net income through that plan. So that's another reason why these additional programs are so important, to make sure that you're maxing out your net, if you will, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
another, I know we're probably going to get to this, but I'll bring it up now, is that it's also what qualifies as, earnings from the context of, and I guess that's our second question, is the definition of earnings. And we'll use that as question number 2, is because not everything that you make would qualify as being insurable. And I think that's the one that really raises a lot of eyebrows. So, Mark, question number 2, what is the definition of earnings?
Yeah, and that is back to ensuring one's lifestyle, or depending on how you make your earnings. If you receive a salary and that's your total income, most contracts will cover that. But if there's any form of incentive pay, other forms of compensation, variable comp, I know you brought up RSUs based on your demographics. I know that's very prevalent there. Commissions, if you're solely commissions, the question then becomes, well, how do they calculate my earnings over an annual basis? Because at time of claim, they're going to look at what earnings are covered, and they're going to base that percentage based on the earnings that's only covered. So if it's salary, but 70% of your earnings are bonuses at year end, or you have commissions, or a substantial amount of your earnings are RSUs that have been vested over 7-8 years of tenure, that may not be included. So that 60% of a much smaller number not only makes, that being a huge gap traditionally just due to the max, but it's also not covering proceeds that you're essentially living off of. So understanding within the contract what the definition of earnings are is extremely important, and a good second question.
Again, if you think about it, if a person says, well, my disability says I have 60% of my earnings covered, and they say, well, I make $220,000. That's not unusual for an executive to make $220,000 of salary, and anywhere's up to like $400,000 or $500,000 a year in addition to that, in what's called restricted stock units, or RSUs, right? And now on surface, somebody said, well, that's investment money. But most of these executives will tell you that they view that not as investment money. That's basically a part of their annual or monthly cash flow.
Yeah, based on the vesting schedule of those RSUs, absolutely. And most domestic carriers will insure a solid portion of those RSUs based on the taxes that they're paying on the RSUs that have been vested. So that could be a huge chunk of their earnings that is just not covered at all.
It's not even considered, it's not even considered earnings from the context of our conversation today. So again, these are things that someone needs to be aware of. You're highly compensated, and you're like delighted the fact that you've been able to negotiate a deal where you're getting a portion of your salary, and portion of it is going to come in stock. You can say, well, this is great because if the company stocks goes up, we're looking good. But then all of a sudden you find out, well, if you become injured, that portion of your income is not going to be insurable.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
All right. So we'll go on to our third question. And again, we're getting, I know you're getting a little bit more technical here, but I think it's really, really important that we address this during today's webcast. That is the definition of disability. So I'm going to ask, we'll just go through a couple of these. And I also want to talk about another factor. So what is the definition of disability? I want to start with something called own occupation. So Mark, just give us the Cliff Notes version of what own occupation entails, and a very important definition, as you'll see here in a minute.
Yeah, so this is where we're really getting into the weeds of the contract, if you will, and specialties within an industry. So I'm going to pick a couple industries that we can hone in on and focus on the specialties on what ONOC protects.
Right.
That's your specific or certain material or duties that you're doing within a certain industry. So say you're an orthopedic surgeon, which is fitting. I just had shoulder surgery 2 weeks ago. So that say that orthopedic surgeon is no longer able to perform surgeries. He was in an accident and he's just not as precise with his hands as he used to be. He may have a tremor or whatever it may be. An ONOC would pay out proceeds or a benefit as long as he's unable to perform that specific duty of being an orthopedic surgeon. Now, he may be fully capable of educating or being a professor at a university and teaching orthopedics or whatever it may be, or being just a regular doctor. But because he's not doing that specific duty as an orthopedic surgeon, he would be protected under that true ONOC contract, and the benefit proceeds would be paid out. And there's usually a limitation or a duration within most group contracts. You can adjust it or have it removed. It becomes costly in order to do so, because you're just shifting more leverage to the insured from the insurance carrier. And that's the big difference. Anytime there's a 2-year limitation or 2-year mental nervous, 2-year ONOC, once that 2-year is up and the claim is still in existence, you're giving that insurance carrier leverage to then reapproach that circumstance or that situation and say, okay, is that person able, based off their education and previous learnings, to do something else, even if it's not specific in their own occupation specific.
And you're segueing into my second question, which is what is the definition of any occupation? So well done there, Mark. So let's talk about the difference between, and I have a follow-up to that too, but we define ONOC as very clearly as basically related to your specific duties of your primary work, right? So any OC obviously implies a broader range of employment.
Yeah, any OC, you're really opening the floodgates for the carrier to say, well, you can work elsewhere regardless. And some have percentage of earning protections in place to say it has to be applicable to what you were doing prior. But when you have an any OC, it's really you use this if you're able to answer phone calls at a reception desk or flip burgers at Burger King.
Take orders. That'll be fries with my burger. Oops.
You really open up the gates for the carrier to say, well, you can work elsewhere and make an earnings, and it gives
it may not be the earnings that you're currently earning, but you can earn an income and your policy under your group plan. And here's you brought something up when we were talking about own occupation, and that is the timeline between when ONOC continues for, how long it continues for, and then when any occupation kicks in. And it's usually, and again, this applies in both United States and Canada, because I was life insured and health insured and licensed up in Canada before I moved to the US, and the same rules apply, is it's usually after 24 months.
Yeah, and
I personally know someone whose spouse was in such a situation, and basically what happened in that case, if I remember correctly, is that after the 24 months, they were basically their coverage was discontinued, and they had to reapply and prove that the spouse could not would qualify as any OC.
Yeah.
And the key point of this is that it's not the employer who makes the call, which you brought up earlier. It's actually the insurance company who's actually insuring the person who decides on this, not the employer. The employer is basically out of their hands.
Yeah, the only say the employer has is the type of contract that's put in place when the group program is
exactly.
And if that's a 2-year ONOC, then that's a 2-year ONOC. If they want it to be more advantageous for the insured or their employees, extending that to age 65 or full duration of
or 5-year own occupation. I've seen a few of those in the past. Yeah. But most own occupations only last for most employees for 24 months. Yeah. And any OC or any occupation kicks in, and then again you get into being you'll be considered disabled if you're unable to perform any duties unable to perform any duties because of illness or injury for which you have previous experience in. So like you said, someone going to college worked worked at a burger joint or order taking sandwiches or, that sort of work, that almost becomes a part of the baseline for determining your ability to earn an income, which can be,
Yeah, for some of the executives we're talking about, that could be a bit extreme, but it certainly, from a contractual standpoint, it potentially could happen. Yes, for sure.
all right. So the next thing is, okay, for someone who is also now they have applied for coverage and they qualify. They actually qualify what, we'll say for own occupation. There's something else they need to be aware of, and that is something known as the elimination period. Could you, again, just provide an overview of what an elimination period entails?
Yeah, that's the duration of time one must satisfy on claim before benefit proceeds are paid out. So from a long-term disability standpoint, that could be 90 days, it could be 180 days. The longer duration, usually the less expensive the contract is, because they have to satisfy a longer duration of time out on claim without payment. And what triggers that is there's traditionally two components. One is the inability to do their material and substantial duties, usually decided by a physician and the insurance carrier, but also is a loss in earnings. So those are the two components. And this can be very important based on how you make your earnings or generate your revenue. If you're solely salary based, once you're unable to work, traditionally the earnings loss will follow in conjunction with that.
Yeah.
It's purely commissions, or you've had bonuses that paid out that are going to pay out continuously over a longer duration of time. You may not see that earnings loss right away, and hence that elimination period may not kickstart simultaneously when you're unable to perform your material and substantial duties. Now, some have an accelerated elimination period where as long as you're unable to do your specific duties, that starts regardless, but some don't. And understanding which contracts do and which don't is all part of the education process.
All right. So again, that's a key point, because you could have someone who is on recurring income streams that could, they could end up saying, well, I qualify and it's been 90 days. Yeah. And they'll say, yeah, but you're still receiving paychecks and you're going to receive paychecks for the next year.
Yeah, exactly. So knowing which contracts cover both and or don't is extremely important.
When it comes to long-term disability as a discussion, and I think for today we would have to agree that we've kind of just sort of scratched the surface. We could have got technical to the point of maybe helpful for insomniacs here, but we at least covered the high points. So I'm sure this is going to be thought-provoking for some of the folks watching and listening today. And for those who are interested in learning more about what you do and are interested in your services, what's the best way for them to reach you directly?
It is through my email. So msinger@newton1.com, or you can always call us 215-499-4700. And we're headquartered in Newark, Delaware, as you said, also in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Center City, Philadelphia, and Manhattan, New York.
But you're able to work though with clients across the country, though. You're not limited to.
Our clients are our clients are national.
Likewise. So that makes us great partners in our efforts to protect the folks, and that's a great thing. And I'm glad we connected. I want to thank you for joining us again today. And again, our special guest today was Mark Singer. He is a partner with Newark, Delaware-based Newton One Advisors, LLC. Mark, thanks very much.
Wayne, thank you. This was a blast.
I look forward to bringing you the 3 Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And to receive notification when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.